Hi all, and welcome back to another edition of the Millennial Cynic. Today I want to discuss a very sad story that was in the news recently, and the unbelievable lack of empathy shown by our government and the Department of Social Protection. Brendan Bjorn McGinnis died on May 17th, aged just 17 years old. He was born with congenital CMV, leaving him profoundly disabled. His illnesses included severe spastic quadriplegia, intractable epilepsy, scoliosis with a spinal fusion, osteoporosis and hip dysplasia. His mother, Tracy McGinnis, provided round-the-clock care for her son, who was also non-verbal and was fed using a tube. Now, before I continue, I would just like to express my deepest condolences to Tracy and her family. I can only imagine the grief you are going through, and I hope you have a good support network around you to help you through this awful time. The reason for this episode is that I am thoroughly disgusted by what happened to Tracy after her son's passing, and that's what I want to discuss today. As is the process here in Ireland, Tracy was in receipt of carer's allowance, and Brendan Bjorn was in receipt of disability allowance after being transferred to that payment from the domiciliary care allowance once he turned 16 years old. The day after Brendan Bjorn passed away, Tracy collected his disability allowance payment of €208 from the post office, thinking that his payments would continue for a further 6 weeks, as they would if it was a spouse or partner who had passed away. She then received a letter in the post on the 10th of June, dated the 30th of May, from the Disability Allowance section of the Department of Social Protection, stating that she was overpaid to the tune of €208 and would need to repay that amount. One singular payment, and they want it back. A paltry €208, and they want it back. There are so many problems with this that it's hard to know where to begin. The first thing that strikes me is the speed at which the department moved to send this letter. Public services are notoriously the slowest of the slow when it comes to anything you need from them. Yet when there's money to be recouped, they move like they're on fire. Now, some people may say, well, it's very sad, all right, but she wasn't technically entitled to it. And I say, bollocks to that. Bollocks to that. This poor woman has lost her son, who she gave up her life to care for. She absolutely should be entitled to this pittance, and far more besides. Technically means nothing here. These people are not numbers on a spreadsheet. They are real people with real feelings and very real grief. Cutting someone off so suddenly is just a cruel and horrible way to kick someone when they're down. She did not continue to collect the payment. She collected it once, the day after her son passed away. Leave her be. Cold, callous and uncaring. That is how I'd describe anyone who thinks she should repay this paltry sum. And I include the Department of Social Protection in that. Tracy is also facing into the reality that all of her supports will be discontinued shortly. I find this abhorrent. A carer like Tracy, who has given her life to care for a loved one, deserves a break, deserves time to grieve and find herself again. A bereavement payment of some kind should be invoked here to help carers in awful situations such as this. The Department of Social Protection needs to do more here. And on that note, the Department of Social Protection. Social protection. The department that is to protect society, protect citizens, protect people. And all they have done is stuck the boot in. Good job. Nice one. Now, I take my anonymity seriously on this channel, and that's why I don't give too much away about myself. So I'm going to have to be as vague as I can about what I'm about to say next. But the reason this story hits close to home for me is that one of my family members worked tirelessly for this very cause, to help carers, to help them get better respite care and supports. And it hurts me to see how little progress has been made. It disgusts me to see how little value our government places on carers. But this story is just indicative of how carers are thought of. Not that long ago, the government here in Ireland introduced a new payment, the Pandemic Unemployment Payment, or PUP for short. It was initially paid at a flat rate of €350 a week to anyone whose job had been put on hold by the lockdown and shutdown of society due to COVID and the measures taken to curb the spread of the virus. This payment was created to avoid vast numbers of people claiming job seekers allowance. Why? Because the rate at which job seekers allowance is paid is only €208 a week, same as disability allowance, and slightly lower than the full carers allowance at €224 a week. So, why create a €350 a week payment for those who lost their jobs due to the pandemic? Well, because the government knew that €208 a week is not enough to live on, and that if they told people to claim that, then no one would have followed the lockdown rules. Now, an argument can be made that job seekers is set at that rate to incentivise working. Okay, fair enough. But why is disability allowance set so low? Why is carers allowance set so low? Surely not to incentivise working. I mean, that would be bonkers. But with the pandemic unemployment payment, the Irish government showed us all that €208 is not enough to live on. So why in God's name are we only paying that much to those who can't work due to long-term illness or disability? Why are we paying a teeny tiny fraction more to carers whose caring work means they cannot work? We've just been shown by the government that it isn't enough to live on, so why are these the rates for disability and carers allowance? Why? Because the government and the Department of Social Protection just don't care. Simple as that. Now you might be thinking that combined the carers and disability allowance add up to more than the PUP. Sure, if you get the full rate of carers allowance, it does. But what if you don't? What if you don't need a carer? Or what if you do get the full rate of both? So what? All the extra costs involved, not least of all healthcare, easily add up to eat into those payments. Sure, you'd have the medical card to cover GP visits, but you still have to pay €1.50 per item dispensed from the chemist. Even with a cap on how much you spend on this per month, it all adds up. If every carer in Ireland decided tomorrow to down tools, so to speak, and say, I can't do this, I need professional care for my loved one, the health system here would collapse in on itself. Let's face it, it's a hair's breadth away from doing that anyway. So why aren't the government doing more for carers to stop this from happening? Well, because they know they have carers over a barrel. Carers will not walk away from their loved ones. The government know this. They also know that they do not have the free time to organise themselves into a real protest. So they don't need to pander to carers because they don't need their votes. And so the status quo remains, a story familiar across a lot of healthcare. Carers and nurses undervalued and underpaid. And yet they are the backbone of our health service. We all have a duty to stand with carers. Who knows what the future holds for any of us, so it's in all our own best interests to demand a real change from our government in how it takes care of the carers. We should be standing with them while they ask for proper respite care, for quicker access to medical treatments that could improve the lives of their loved ones, and for quicker access to financial supports without prejudice. This poor woman, and the many others like her, should be able to grieve in peace without the financial worry of supports being taken away from her piece by piece. I personally would wholeheartedly support a bereavement payment for carers. Most have given up large chunks of their lives to care for their loved one, and when the time comes, it is not fair to put a time limit on their grief and then effectively tell them to get back to work. A measure of society is how well they treat their vulnerable. Well, carers are right there in that bracket, giving their all to help their loved ones. These people should be looked after without having to worry. They should be protected, just like the Department of Social Protection is supposed to do. My sincerest condolences and sympathies to Tracy and her family once again. I hope our government departments do what they should be doing anyway to help you, and I am sorry that you still have to fight for everything. Rest in peace, Brendan Bjorn. Slán go fóill.